I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We have a lot of great stories for you tonight. We invite you to interact with us, communicate, talk to us about any or all of the stories. All the ways to communicate with us right there at the bottom of the screen. You can email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or you can use the hashtag TheStoryKGW on Twitter, or you can leave us a voicemail. Call our phone number, 503-226-5090. Well, you've been talking to us about the awful shooting in Texas lately, and we've been listening. We often end up putting together stories based on your feedback. Tom wrote, after what happened in Texas, it's time to get the gubernatorial candidates on record regarding gun control. Yep, I agree, Tom. Great idea. We took the question to all three candidates running for governor in Oregon. We asked Democrat Tina Kotek, the non-affiliated Betsy Johnson, and Republican Christine Drazan for interviews. All three women are former Oregon lawmakers, so before we get into their plans, let's take a look at how they voted already on three key gun laws. Here's how they voted on background checks for private sales in 2015. Kotek said yes, Johnson said no, and Drazan was not yet in the legislature. Here are their votes on the red flag law for 2017, which keeps guns away from people who could harm themselves or others. Kotek voted yes, Johnson voted no, Drazan still not in the legislature at that time. And here's how they voted on the safe gun storage law in 2021. Kotek yes, Johnson no, Drazan no. We'll start tonight with Johnson, who said she did not want a discussion of gun laws to become an argument over ideologies.
What I don't want to do is to use this tragedy as we have after other shootings, whether they're at schools or at grocery stores, to send us off into our ideological corners to continue to battle about this.
Johnson said she has several ideas to help make Oregon safer from gun violence.
I would absolutely find a way to have stronger mental health prevention and intervention in our schools and on our streets. Oregon is 50th last in the nation. As governor, I would take this as a state level shame and I would fix it. Secondly, work directly with school districts to support what they deem appropriate in their communities. Parents and teachers have to be involved in this conversation. What meets their community standards in terms of safe school infrastructure? And then be prepared to battle for a budget in Salem that funds those infrastructure improvements. And then finally, a more aggressive enforcement of our existing laws. We've got plenty of laws on the books. What we need is the manpower, the money to enforce those.
As I mentioned earlier, all three candidates for governor are former state lawmakers. So as we talk about important issues like this one, we're also going to be talking to them about how they voted in the past.
Okay, thank you. As we're checking voting records, though, I see back in 2015 that you voted against background checks for private sales. In 2017, you voted against the red flag law, and in 2021, against the safe storage. Would you really take action to protect Oregonians?
Absolutely. I believe, and I am a gun owner, I absolutely believe that one of the responsibilities of owning a gun and law-abiding citizens do this is to provide safe storage. I heard from law enforcement people that some of these laws, the way that they were written, and I'm looking at the language on the four corners of the bill, were unenforceable, dangerous for public safety personnel, and I thought in some instances lacked due process. And when I'm hearing that from law enforcement professionals, I have to listen to them. They're the guys that are out on the front lines in the street. What I want to focus on, Pat, are solutions that are practical, not ideological. And I think that's reflective of my voting record.
All right. Thank you. But one more time on those. Are those really ideological bills? The universal background checks, for example, for private sales, and that red flag law and the lock up the guns? None of that seems really ideological.
Well, I'm concerned about its enforceability and its practicality.
All right. Could you talk about that a little more? Why do you think they're not enforceable?
Well, there's not going to be law enforcement at every private sale transaction. If you and I buy and sell a gun, how practically do you have that tracked?
All right, but what about even just...
Pat, let me go back and just say this more. The solution is not passing more laws for law-abiding citizens.
So that's what she had to say on that. Now, on to Tina Kotek, who believes gun violence can be stopped.
Here's what I know. Gun violence is preventable. And we have to do better. I don't think this is the type of state or country we want to live in when these things happen. Because it's really only happening in our country. And I think we can do better.
Kotek has specific ideas on additional laws that Oregon could pass to make the state safer.
We need to ban ghost guns, the ability for people to make guns in their own homes. We have to get on top of that. We need, I believe, to increase the age at which you can buy an assault weapon. Right now, you can do that at 18. I think it should be at least 21. As we saw with the shooter yesterday, 18, went out and bought an assault rifle. I believe we should ban people from owning guns if they've been convicted of a hate crime.
As we highlighted earlier, Kotek voted yes on all 3 gun safety bills in Oregon: background checks on private sales, red flag law, and gun storage.
As House Speaker, I've worked really hard to pass common sense gun violence prevention bills, keeping the guns out of the hands of domestic abusers and stalkers, making sure people who buy firearms have to have a background check, making sure that when you own a firearm, you store it safely and report it when it goes stolen. Very basic things. We're trying here to do our part.
Kotek also believes there needs to be more investment in treatment of mental health. And let me just say, before you accuse me of being partisan, I wanted to talk with Republican Christine Drazan about this issue, but she did not make herself available. We contacted her campaign Wednesday morning and gave her the same amount of time to respond or schedule an interview as we did with the other campaigns. We were told she was traveling out of state Wednesday, so we said today would be fine, and today apparently was not fine because we just got no response. We are still asking for an interview on this topic, and we will be happy to talk with her any day next week or even the week after that, because we think the issue is important, it's not going away, and you should hear from her thoughts on the topic and her answers about her voting record. In the meantime, we got a written statement from her campaign. It quotes Drazan as saying, "For any mother, what happened yesterday in Texas is our worst nightmare. No parent should have to worry about their child's safety at school. No child should have to fear violence taking place in their own classroom. My heart is broken over the lives lost in this horrific and evil act. We can and must do more to protect our kids. That includes investing in school resource officers and ensuring that individuals who should not have access to a classroom do not gain access to a classroom. As governor, my budget will provide dedicated funding to strengthen school safety measures to prevent these kinds of heinous attacks from occurring." Let's take a look at Oregon's history of gun laws and mass shootings. Starting with the Thurston High School shooting in Springfield in 1998. A teenager killed his parents and 2 students and injured 25 others. 2 years after that, voters in Oregon passed a measure requiring background checks at gun shows or before a licensed dealer sells a gun. That's the only ballot measure involving guns that Oregonians have ever passed. In 2004, the federal ban on assault weapons, which had started back in 1994, expired. Oregon has never passed its own assault weapons ban. 6 other states, including California, have passed bans, as has Washington, D.C. In 2009, Oregon lawmakers passed a bill to comply with federal gun laws for those with severe mental health issues. It requires the state to send the names of people banned from owning guns to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. The next year, in 2010, the Portland City Council passed its own gun control measures, including a ban on carrying loaded guns in public places. That was then challenged in court. In 2012, a gunman opened fire at Clackamas Town Center just outside Portland, killing 2 people and injuring another. The year after that, the state Supreme Court ruled on Portland's gun ban and ban on loaded guns, that is, in public places, and decided that it is indeed constitutional. In 2014, 4 students were hurt in a shooting outside Rosemary Anderson High School in Portland. In 2015, Oregon lawmakers passed background checks for all private gun sales. That expanded on the ballot measure applying to gun shows and dealers that had passed back in 2000. Also in 2015, a gunman shot and killed 9 people at Umpqua Community College in Roseburg. 8 others were hurt. In 2016, Governor Kate Brown signed an executive order directing Oregon State Police to maintain a database for gun sales. The next year, state lawmakers passed a red flag law. That's the one that keeps guns away from people who are deemed at risk of harming themselves or others. In 2019, a student entered a classroom in Portland's Park Rose High School with a loaded gun. However, a security guard got the gun away from him and no one was hurt. Investigators said the teen only planned to hurt himself. That same year, state lawmakers passed a bill to close the so-called boyfriend loophole. That takes guns away from people convicted of domestic abuse against an unmarried partner. And last year, the legislature passed the safe storage law. It requires gun owners to keep their firearms locked up when they're not using them. It also lets schools ban people from bringing guns on campus, even if they have a permit to carry them. So, what's happening with gun control now? Well, a group is gathering signatures to get two measures on the November ballot. One would ban assault weapons in Oregon, and the other would require gun owners to have permits. Today, Mike Benner got an update on their efforts to get tens of thousands of signatures before the July 8th deadline.
We do not have to endure this. We do not have to treat this as normal.
In Northeast Portland's Augustana Lutheran Church Thursday, a group primarily made up of faith leaders is turning anger into action.
We can make a difference. We will make a difference. We are going to change the narrative right now.
Rabbi Michael Kahana is focused on changing the narrative around gun violence. He and others with Lift Every Voice Oregon are calling for stricter gun laws in Oregon.
We have to take sensible gun actions for public health right now. We cannot wait any longer.
Lift Every Voice Oregon is working to get Initiative Petition 17 on the November ballot. IP 17 calls for permits and thorough background checks for all gun purchases while banning large capacity magazines.
Nobody needs 30-round magazines. Our bill limits magazines to 10. That's sufficient. It's been proven to reduce the number of deaths and injuries.
Just maybe a law like that would have saved lives in Uvalde, Texas. Although the small town is more than 2,000 miles away from the Rose City, what happened there hits home for each member of Lift Every Voice Oregon. Take Oregon State Treasurer Tobias Reed, for instance. He's a father of two.
I have to hold my breath a little bit when I watch them leave for school. And my heart breaks just a little bit every time my wife and I have to describe the latest school shooting.
Lift every voice and sing.
Enough is enough, according to those who spent the morning at Augustana Lutheran Church. They say the time to act is now.
We are fed up. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. Action is what is needed right now.
It's been 50 years since Title IX was passed, which banned gender discrimination in schools. So we set out to find if baseball and softball teams at high schools in Oregon are being treated equally.
I think people are starting to get it. I hope that there needs to be that lens of equity, whether you're in a school building or athletic fields, that you need to be thinking of everyone.
Welcome back. Keep sending your questions and comments to the story at kgw.com. I just checked, a lot of you have a lot to say about guns and about that interview with Betsy Johnson. Thank you. Keep them coming. Or you could also give a call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. You've probably heard of Title IX. It's the federal law that helped level the playing field for girls and women's sports. Next month marks the 50th anniversary of that landmark gender equity law. But after all these years, are things really equal, specifically in high school sports, like baseball and softball? Well, to find out, investigative reporter Kyla Boshi sent out surveys to softball coaches and athletic directors across the state of Oregon, and 156 replied.
At Westview High School in Beaverton, softball is second to none. Like their male counterparts who play baseball, the girls have a well-maintained softball field with an electronic scoreboard, permanent fencing around the outfield.
No balls, one strike.
A press box.
Playing right field, number 7.
And covered dugouts. But getting to this point hasn't been easy.
Good eye, hustle down. We started with just a slab of dirt and a backstop in 1994, and are they ready?
Rhonda McKenzie is the school's first and only head coach.
Oh, yeah.
She started the softball program almost 3 decades ago.
When they build a new school, they slap up something for you, and then it's kind of up to you to create the rest. And that's not something that necessarily a coach has a great background in.
Over the years, Mackenzie, along with parents, have pushed to level the playing field. In 2014, a couple moms told the school board they believe the softball facilities at Westview violated Title IX, the federal law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex.
We just had cyclone fencing.
In response, improvements were made to the softball batting cage to match the boys.
I think the inequities in facilities, baseball, softball, for example, they were never intentional. But to fix them, you have to be intentional.
2 outs now, bottom second. Zoe ripped up the middle.
So how does high school softball compare to baseball elsewhere around the state? To find out, KGW sent surveys to softball coaches and athletic directors throughout Oregon. 156 replied. The biggest disparity were the dugouts. 4 out of 10 respondents said there were differences in dugouts for girls versus boys. Some had wooden benches versus metal, some were covered when others were not. The other difference, scoreboards. Of the coaches and ADs that responded, 3 out of 10 said there were noticeable differences between softball and baseball scoreboards. Some were electronic while others were not. A few scoreboards didn't work. But overall, the vast majority, 88%, said softball and baseball are treated equally when factoring in equipment, transportation, the fields, and facilities.
I think people are starting to get it, I hope, that there needs to be that lens of equity, whether you're in a school building or athletic fields, that you need to be thinking of everyone.
Longtime Grant High School softball coach Debbie Engelstedt admits getting to where we are now has been a struggle, often requiring appeals to district leaders and even lawsuits.
It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of frustration and a lot of tears and a lot of, you just kind of keep fighting the fight.
Members of the Lake Oswego softball team are going to court. They're accusing their school of violating Title IX. That's a federal law.
In 2017, the Lake Oswego School District agreed to make improvements for the high school softball team after several players filed a Title IX lawsuit in federal court.
Softball will be down here.
Last year, Coach Engelstedt and several players filed a similar lawsuit against Portland Public due to the lack of softball facilities at Grant. Unlike boys baseball, the girls spent decades playing on a dirt field at Wilshire Park, more than a mile away.
The kids often will catch the bus over here on 33rd with their bags and everything and head up to the field. That's where we practice. That's where our games would be.
As part of a settlement agreement, the softball team will finally get the field they were promised at Grant. It is due to be complete by early summer.
You know, in the end, obviously, it's going to happen, and it's going to be worth it, and it's going to be a great thing for the school and our student body. But I also think it gave my players over all these years some empowerment in realizing that they can speak their voice, and when things don't look right, they have a voice.
1-0.
50 years after Title IX.
Let's go, Kaya. Let's go, bud.
Many longtime coaches believe female athletes are finally being treated fairly. But it hasn't been easy, and there's still some improvements to be made.
So very interesting, Kyle. Tell me more about the survey. Were you surprised by the results?
A little bit. It certainly was not what I expected. You know, we started looking into this after a couple parents, they contacted me. They were upset about lousy equipment and facilities, and they didn't think the softball team was being treated fairly. So we sent out the survey expecting to hear maybe something similar, concerns over inequity. But instead, as you heard there, 88% said softball and baseball were in fact equal.
Well, okay, but what about the 12%, those who don't think the playing field is level? What'd you find in those surveys? Any trends?
Yeah, and to be clear, this wasn't exactly scientific, but based on the results we got, it appears that a lot of the smaller, more rural schools, they're the ones struggling to provide equal opportunities for boys and girls. Many of the schools who don't have the same or similar equipment or facilities for softball and baseball, from what we found, were located on the southern Oregon coast or eastern Oregon. And one other thing I found interesting in speaking with some of the coaches, they said that while high school softball has certainly improved, youth leagues have not. Unlike boys in, say, Little League or youth baseball, there's not a lot of funding for those youth softball leagues, those development programs. That's where the coaches see a lot of inequity.
All right, thank you, Kyle. More work to be done on that. Appreciate your time and your reports. KGW just launched a brand new true crime podcast that we want you to know about. It's called Should Be Alive. It examines the 2019 murder of a Vancouver teenager named Nikki Kuhnhausen, who was killed for being transgender. The first episode is available now wherever you get your podcast. There will be 6 episodes total, with a new one launching each Wednesday. This week, we're featuring stories about transgender people in our community. A lot of people fight over their rights and identities, and young people feel the brunt of those conversations. Here's Galen Etlin.
These Oregon youth share experience coming out as transgender.
Very difficult process for me.
But each has a different journey. 13-year-old Emma told her parents when she was 5.
Saying, I am a girl, I'm your daughter, I am not a boy.
13-year-old George at age 9.
I always kind of knew, my parents always kind of knew.
And 16-year-old Amelia, around 12.
Dad still doesn't quite understand it.
They knew who they are. But like many trans youth, they face disproportionate discrimination in the community and at school.
Writing my names on the walls of the gender-neutral bathroom, calling me slurs.
And they get all the questions.
Are you going to have surgery? Do you have a penis?
Really invasive things that would not be asked of somebody else.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm not going to answer that because that's none of your business.
The impact is huge.
Beth Russell has been a school counselor for 17 years.
We've seen a huge increase in the students coming in talking about gender and gender identity.
And Beth made the tough choice to come out as non-binary at work.
What is that like for you?
Sometimes it's exhausting. Sometimes it's incredibly rewarding.
Beth helps all students, but through lived experience also offers unique visibility to trans youth and their families.
Parents don't want their kids' lives to be harder.
There's no push to gender or identity, just support for trans youth at significantly higher risk of depression and suicide.
A lot of times we're just surviving. We have to stop making this all about politics and rules and let it be about connection. It's not our job to discuss the validity of their identity. It's our job to love them.
Beth says a national flood of anti-LGBTQ laws and school board votes greatly impacts trans youth, often the targets.
We don't even get a say in that is entirely unfair.
It's not right.
For those looking up to you, what would your message be?
There's always going to be one person who's going to be there for you. I mean, you can't face this alone. You can't face the giant monster called gender identity without a companion.
I'm not trying to change what other people believe. I'm just asking to be treated with respect for who I am. I hope to continue to offer that message of hope and positivity.
Through the challenges and misunderstandings, they hold this close.
The pleasure of knowing who I am.
We are seeing some parent groups around Oregon working to prevent school districts from sharing lessons about gender identity, even though most kids find out who they are on their own, and science shows it's not a phase. A study published in the journal Pediatrics this year followed kids for 5 years between the ages of 3 and 12 who socially transitioned, and by the end of it, only 7.3% had retransitioned. So local experts are trying to increase that understanding for adults. The Transactive Gender Project at Lewis and Clark College just announced it will offer a new training certificate program.
Specifically focused on helping professionals that work with children and youth, provide them with the tools and the information and the history so that they can better serve the needs of these youth.
First in the nation, you said?
First in the nation. We think it's going to be a game changer.
That rolls out later this year, and we have more information about resources and ongoing efforts to suppress LGBTQ voices on KGW.com. Galen Etlin, KGW News.
For this week's Hey Help campaign, we're asking you to donate to PFLAG Southwest Washington. They're an advocacy group for LGBTQ people and their families and friends. They hold monthly support meetings and offer educational programs and other resources. If you want to help, just hold your phone's camera up to the QR code there on your screen, or you can always go to kgw.com/heyhelp. Well, that's our program. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. But remember, the story, our story, well, that never ends. We'll see you tomorrow.